All right, so today we're going to be looking at some stuff about short selling and corporate
Oh,
watchdogs.
yeah.
You guys sent us a bunch of articles all about Hindenburg Research.
Right.
You know, that firm that seemed to make billionaires lose sleep
Yeah.
with all their investigations, and then all of a sudden they shut down?
Just like that. Poof.
So today we're going to try to figure out what Hindenburg Research's impact really was, their methods, who they targeted, and what this sudden closure means for corporate accountability.
Yeah, it's really a story with so many twists and turns.
Exactly. And there are so many questions to consider. Like, how did this relatively small firm, achieve an 81% success rate in short selling?
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge.
That's no small feat.
Were they just incredibly lucky, or did their methods reveal something, maybe a little deeper about market vulnerabilities?
I think it points to a combination of factors.
Okay.
They were incredibly thorough in their research. They were digging deep into financial statements, regulatory filings, and even on-the-ground investigations. They weren't afraid to challenge, conventional wisdom or go after powerful entities.
So it wasn't just about crunching numbers. They were doing some serious detective work.
Oh, yeah, they were doing the legwork.
But before we go too far, I think it's worth sort of taking a step back.
Yeah.
I know you follow finance really closely, but for anyone listening who might need a refresher, can you explain what short selling is and why it's considered so risky?
Sure. So short selling is essentially betting against a company.
Okay.
So you borrow shares of a company's stock,
Right.
you sell them at the current market price, and then hope to buy them back later at a lower price when you return them to the lender.
Got it.
And the difference between the selling price and the buying price is your profit.
Okay.
But if the stock price goes up instead of down, you lose money.
So it's a high stakes game with the potential for big rewards, but also massive losses.
Huge risks. Yeah.
No wonder it attracts those who are willing to take risks.
Yeah.
But back to Hindenburg. Why would the founder, Nate Anderson, decide to close down a firm that was clearly so successful?
Well, Anderson cited several reasons
Yeah.
in his announcement, but most notably the personal toll of the work.
Yeah.
He described the intense pressure, the hostility and even threats he faced from those he targeted.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it wasn't just a job, it was a lifestyle that consumed him.
I can imagine that, especially when you're going after such, high-profile people.
Yeah, and he also mentioned wanting to spend more time with loved ones,
Of course.
suggesting that the demanding nature of the work had strained his personal life.
Yeah, that makes sense. Even if you're super passionate about exposing wrongdoing, constantly facing powerful adversaries can take its toll.
Oh, for sure.
But then there's this other twist. He decided to make his investigative methods public.
He did.
Basically released a playbook for anyone who wants to follow in his footsteps.
Yeah, he essentially democratized the tools of short selling, which has sparked a lot of debate. Some see it as a positive development, empowering more individuals to act as corporate watchdogs.
Kind of like a crowdsourced system of accountability.
Exactly. But others worry that this information could be misused by less scrupulous actors to manipulate markets or damage companies unfairly.
So it's a bit of a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
More transparency and potential for accountability, but also the risk of greater market volatility and even malicious attacks.
Yeah, precisely. And this leads to some interesting questions about the future of short selling and its role in corporate governance.
Okay, so before we dive into those bigger questions, let's take a look at some of Hindenburg's most high-profile cases.
Right.
Their targets ranged from small companies to massive conglomerates.
Right.
Where should we start?
Well, let's begin with Eros International PLC, an Indian media and entertainment company.
Okay.
Hindenburg's report alleged accounting irregularities and a scheme to inflate the company's stock price.
And what happened after Hindenburg released their findings?
Well, Eros International shares plummeted, losing a staggering 99% of their value.
Wow, 99%.
It was a dramatic example of how a well-researched short-selling report can impact a company's fortunes.
A 99% drop, that's almost unheard of. Talk about a direct hit.
Yeah, it's a prime example of why Hindenburg earned the nickname the market destroyer from some corners of the financial world.
Wow, okay, so they clearly had a knack for uncovering shady dealings.
Yeah.
Is there another case that highlights their investigative prowess?
Absolutely. Let's move on to the Yangtze River Port and Logistics case,
Okay.
which is perhaps even more audacious.
All right, lay it on me. What did Hindenburg uncover this time?
This company claimed to operate a massive port in China.
Okay.
Hindenburg's investigation revealed that this port, supposedly bustling with activity, was entirely fictitious.
What?
It simply didn't exist.
Wait, a completely fabricated report. How do you even pull off something like that?
It's a testament to Hindenburg's meticulous research that they were able to expose such an elaborate deception. The company's stock unsurprisingly crashed after the report was published.
So they weren't just going after companies with questionable accounting practices. They were exposing outright fraud.
Straight up.
But they didn't always win, right? Weren't they involved in a high-profile battle with Tesla?
You're right. Even the most skilled short sellers can miscalculate.
Yeah.
Hindenburg publicly bet against Tesla, claiming that the electric car company was overvalued and that its CEO, Elon Musk, was engaging in reckless behavior.
And how did that play out?
It backfired spectacularly.
Oh, no.
Tesla stock continued to soar, making Hindenburg's short position a significant loss.
Ouch.
It demonstrated that even with thorough research, short selling is inherently risky and market sentiment can sometimes defy logic.
So it's not a foolproof strategy, and even the best can get it wrong sometimes.
Exactly, and it highlights the importance of understanding the nuances of short selling and the forces at play in the market.
Right, so we've seen examples of Hindenburg's successes and a notable failure. But there's one case that really put them on the global map, especially here in India. I'm talking, of course, about the Adani Group.
Ah, yes, the Adani saga. That's where things get really interesting.
And that's exactly where we'll pick up in part 2 of this deep dive. Welcome back. We're picking up our deep dive right where we left off with Hindenburg Research's explosive report on the Adani Group.
Right.
This wasn't just another short-selling report.
No.
It was a bombshell that sent shockwaves through India's financial markets.
It really was.
So this report, released in early 2023, alleged a vast web of stock manipulation, accounting fraud, and misuse of offshore tax havens by the Adani Group.
Right.
They were accusing the conglomerate of artificially inflating its stock prices and misleading investors for decades.
Yeah, essentially.
So this wasn't just about financial malfeasance.
I know.
It touched on issues of corporate governance, regulatory oversight, and even political influence.
Absolutely.
And, the Adani Group, led by Gautam Adani, is a major player in India's infrastructure and energy sectors.
Right.
They have close ties to the government and have benefited from numerous public contracts and favorable policies.
For sure.
So Hindenburg wasn't just taking on a corporation, they were challenging a system that seemed to favor the powerful and well-connected.
Exactly.
And the fallout was significant. Adani Group's stock prices plummeted after the report's release, wiping out billions of dollars in market value.
Yeah, investors panicked, and there were calls for investigations by regulators and lawmakers.
It seemed like the Adani empire was teetering on the brink of collapse.
Yeah.
But then something interesting happened. They didn't crumble. They weathered the storm and even managed to regain some of their lost ground.
Right.
How did they pull that off?
Well, Adani Group employed a multi-pronged strategy to counter the allegations and restore investor confidence.
Okay.
They vehemently denied any wrongdoing. They launched a public relations blitz to defend their reputation and took steps to shore up their financial position.
So it was a combination of aggressive defense and strategic maneuvering.
Exactly. They paid down debts, reassured investors about their long-term prospects, and leveraged their diverse business portfolio,
Right.
which includes ports, airports, energy, and even food processing, to demonstrate their resilience.
It's almost like they were too big to fail. Their operations were so deeply intertwined with India's economy that any major collapse would have had ripple effects throughout the country.
That's one interpretation.
Yeah.
Some analysts also pointed to the Adani effect,
Okay.
a term used to describe the influence that powerful individuals and corporations can wield to shape narratives and influence investigations.
So despite the serious allegations raised by Hindenburg, Adani managed to control the narrative and deflect much of the criticism.
To a certain extent, yes. But the story didn't end there.
Right.
Hindenburg's report prompted calls for a thorough investigation by the Securities and Exchange Board of India,
Right.
SEBI, the country's market regulator. However, those investigations have been slow-moving and shrouded in secrecy.
That raises some red flags. Why the lack of transparency? Was there pressure to protect Adani?
Well, there have been allegations of conflicts of interest within SEBI.
Wow.
The chairperson's husband has investments in firms linked to Adani, leading to concerns about potential bias and a lack of impartiality.
So even though Hindenburg exposed potential wrongdoing, the system responsible for holding Adani accountable seemed to be failing. It's a classic example of how power and influence can shield even the most powerful entities from scrutiny.
It's a sobering reminder of the challenges of corporate accountability, especially when dealing with conglomerates that have deep political connections and economic clout.
But even if the Hindenburg report didn't lead to immediate consequences for Adani in India, there's still that U.S. court case looming, right?
Yeah.
The one involving Sagar and Adani, Gautam Adani's brother.
That's right. That case predates the Hindenburg report and involves allegations of a massive bribery scheme related to solar energy contracts.
Yeah.
It's a separate legal battle,
Right.
but it adds another layer of complexity to the Adani saga.
Okay, let's unpack this U.S. court case a bit.
Yeah.
What are the key accusations and why is it so significant?
Okay, so U.S. prosecutors allege that Sagar Adani bribed Indian government officials to secure lucrative solar energy contracts for his company. The sums involved are staggering, potentially running into thousands of crores of rupees.
Those are some serious allegations, and this case is being heard in a New York federal court far from the political influence of India.
Exactly, and that's why it's so crucial. The U.S. justice system has a reputation for independence and a willingness to pursue high-profile cases, even against powerful individuals and corporations.
So while Adani may have weathered the storm in India, they could face a much tougher battle in the U.S.
Potentially.
This court case has the potential to uncover evidence and expose practices that might have remained hidden in India.
Absolutely. The U.S. court has the power to subpoena witnesses, demand documents, and compel testimony, potentially revealing details about Adani's dealings that could have far-reaching implications.
This is where things get really intriguing. Could this U.S. court case achieve what the Indian authorities haven't been able to?
It's certainly a possibility. The outcome of this case could have a domino effect, prompting further investigations and potentially leading to legal action against Adani and other jurisdictions.
So even though Hindenburg Research has closed its doors, the ramifications of their actions are still unfolding, and the Adani Group might not be out of the woods just yet.
Precisely. And this brings us to a broader question. What does the future hold for corporate accountability in a world where information is both a weapon and a shield?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll delve into in the final part of our deep dive. We'll explore the potential rise of independent short sellers, the role of technology in exposing corporate wrongdoing, and the challenges of ensuring transparency and accountability in a globalized economy. All right, so welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the legacy of Hindenburg Research.
Yeah.
We've been unpacking their short-selling tactics, their impact on companies like Eros International and the Adani Group, and the potential consequences of that U.S. court case against Sagar Adani.
Right. A lot to cover.
And speaking of that U.S. court case, it's a reminder that even though Hindenburg Research is gone, their actions continue to have ripple effects,
Right.
especially with this case potentially shining a light on Adani Group's operations in a way that Indian authorities haven't.
It's really interesting to observe how the jurisdiction of this case could influence its outcome.
Yeah.
The U.S. justice system operates independently from India's, with its own set of legal precedents and enforcement mechanisms.
So could this case potentially achieve what Indian regulators haven't been able to, holding the Adani Group accountable for alleged wrongdoing?
It's certainly a possibility. The U.S. court has the power to compel testimony, demand documents, and subpoena witnesses, regardless of their location or political connections.
It's almost like a legal thriller unfolding in real time.
Yeah.
We've got allegations of bribery, potential conflicts of interest, and a powerful conglomerate fighting to protect its reputation.
And let's not forget the political dimension. With Trump back in the White House, there's some speculation about potential interference in the case, given his past associations with the Adani family.
Yeah, that adds a whole other layer of intrigue. Could we see political pressure being applied to influence the outcome of the trial?
It's certainly a question worth considering. However, the U.S. Department of Justice has a very strong tradition of independence.
Right.
And it would be highly unusual for a president to directly intervene in a legal case.
So while the possibility of political interference can't be entirely ruled out, it's likely not the main factor driving this case.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
The prosecutors seem determined to pursue the evidence wherever it leads, regardless of the political implications.
But let's zoom out a bit and think about the bigger picture.
Okay.
Hindenburg's closure doesn't mean that short-selling or investigative journalism will disappear.
Absolutely not. In fact, we may see even more individuals and organizations stepping up to fill the void left by Hindenburg.
So it's almost like a decentralized movement with the power to expose corporate wrongdoing shifting away from traditional institutions and into the hands of citizens, journalists, and independent researchers.
That's a compelling observation. And with the rise of social media and online platforms, information spreads faster than ever before.
Right.
This means that companies can no longer operate in the shadows.
Yeah.
Their actions, both good and bad, are subject to constant scrutiny.
It's a double-edged sword for
It
corporations.
is.
Transparency can be a powerful force for accountability,
Right.
but it also makes them more vulnerable to reputational damage, even from unfounded accusations.
This is where the role of responsible journalism becomes more critical than ever.
Yeah.
We need journalists who can carefully vet information, verify sources, and provide context to help the public separate fact from fiction.
Yeah, we all need to become more discerning consumers of information, questioning sources, and avoiding jumping to conclusions based on headlines or social media posts.
Absolutely. Critical thinking is essential in navigating this complex landscape of information. And perhaps that's one of the most enduring legacies of Hindenburg Research.
Hmm.
They showed us that even a small firm with the right information and the courage to speak out can challenge powerful entities and force them to answer for their actions.
They really raised the bar for corporate accountability.
They did.
And now it's up to all of us to maintain and even elevate those standards.
It is.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we leave you with this thought.
Okay.
In a world where information is both a weapon and a shield, it's up to each of us to wield it wisely and responsibly. The future of corporate accountability rests not just on regulators or watchdogs, but on all of us.
We have the power to demand transparency, hold corporations accountable, and shape a more just and equitable world. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.